Are you aware that World Trade Center 7 collapsed without being struck by a plane on 9/11 at 5:20 in the afternoon, and the 9/11 Commission report makes no mention of World Trade Center 7?
Yes, I'm aware of all that, but I don't usually go there. And there's a lot of reasons I don't go there, and it's kind of complicated. It'd take another half hour to talk about it, but I just as soon just leave it at that. If you
No
don't mind.
problem. We're going to try to speed it up. What's your... okay, I kind of already crossed that. Are you aware that the chief of Pakistani Intelligence was never investigated for the transfer of over $100,000 to Mohammed Atta, ringleader of the 9/11 hijackers?
Well, that's chicken feed, to be honest with you. If you take a look at the background of Pakistani intelligence, you'll discover that they trained Al-Qaeda. They're very much mixed up in all this terrorist business. In fact, this Bhutto, who was assassinated, under her leadership, the Pakistani intelligence bureaus were training these terrorists. And she was basically an international socialist. I want to say communist, but I've never seen her party card. But she was touted all over the United States as being a moderate Muslim, when in fact she was not hardly a Muslim at all. She was more a socialist than anything.
Are you aware of we talked about this before, the peer-reviewed scientific journals that have proven that military-grade nanothermite was found in the World Trade Center debris?
Yeah, I'm aware of all of that, but I can tell you at the same time, if any of this stuff came to trial, all that evidence would be obfuscated so much that you'd end up with a hung jury. And that's why we don't go there, is because we know that the end it'd be too frustrating. And cost at least $1 million to get there.
A real investigation,
Yeah.
so we're not just hit with another Warren Commission or something.
Well, not only that, but who would investigate? The government? Well, if the government was to blame, as some people profess, then why go to the government to investigate what they did? There are those that want to go to the UN. I find that very dangerous.
That's dangerous.
But so then the question comes up, who does the investigation? Who handles the money? Who raises the money? Who sets the tone? My advice to anyone who believes that these things are a problem, that they launch a suit. By launching a suit, then you have subpoena power. Otherwise, the private citizen doesn't. And I find it rather strange that a lot of these organizations that have grown up around 9/11 are not doing what Judicial Watch did and launched suits. But the problem is they talk about how instead of who. I'm not interested in how unless I can find the who guilty.
Right.
And so I'm more interested in the who. And so nobody wants a problem without a solution being presented to them.
Right.
Nor does anyone want a crime exposed where the guilty are not punished. And we're not talking about who's guilty and how we take them to jail. We're talking about thermite, we're talking about this, we're talking about the other thing. It's all the how. I'm not interested in that. I want to know who.
Okay. Two more questions. Would you consider the Gulf of Tonkin incident as a state-sponsored act of terrorism or a way to cause a false pretext to get the U.S. committed in Vietnam?
Well, I don't know that I would use the word terrorism in regard to that, but obviously it was a phony.
It was a false pretext.
Yeah, it was a false pretext to get us involved more and more in Vietnam. There's no question of that. Actually, we would never have been involved in Vietnam if our own State Department had not installed Mao Zedong.
That's right.
And so it all leads back to the State Department. And like James Forrestal said, who was the first Secretary of Defense, once it was renamed from the War Department, he said that, if the State Department was making mistakes, at least once in a while you think they'd make one in our favor. So he didn't believe all these things that the State Department was doing were mistakes, because we kept losing and losing and losing. And it was obvious to him and to many others that it was designed.
All right, final question. How do we follow Ben Franklin's advice and not trade our liberty for security?
Well, we've got to understand that you can't. You got to understand the consequences of doing so, that in the long run you don't have either security or safety or liberty. You just can't do that. And it's part of the lessons we no longer learn in school.
Right.
We don't study the Constitution like we once did. We don't study a lot of things like that. We don't study logic anymore, for instance. We don't study the principles undergirding the Constitution. And we don't study history the way it should be taught. History is a history lesson of conspiracies, of people who want power and those who don't. Now, there are some cases like Columbus discovering America, or that kind of thing that don't fit that pattern. But when it comes to the changes in government and empire and all of that, it's always conspiracy. But we don't teach the students that any longer, and how people conspire to come to control. Hitler was only one man. Stalin was only one man. Genghis Khan was only one man. They had to form organization, and they had to fool people as to what their real intent was in order for them to come to power and have absolute power. And a lot of people, and I'd like to interject one thing in here too, is that a lot of people think this has to do with money. It isn't. Let's say, for instance, that David Rockefeller walked through that door right now and told you to cut my throat. Well, what you would do is you get out your cell phone and you call 911. You say, there's a crazy here. And they come and arrest him. They take him down to county jail. Now, he'd be out real quick because he's got a lot of money, a lot of lawyers under retainer. But if this was 1950 and Mao Zedong walked through that door and we were in China and told you to cut my throat, that you knew you had two choices, yours or mine. That's real power. Transcends money power tremendously. And so a lot of people don't understand that. It's not money, it's only a tool to get that total power. Because if I don't care if I was the richest man on earth, if a guy's got a gun and I don't, I can't get out my checkbook. It doesn't work.
Thank you very much,
my
Mr.
pleasure.
Thompson. Let me
Yeah.
just get a shot with you here.
We'll shake the hand.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
you're
All right,
welcome.
brother.